Before I got into advisory, I owned a business in forestry and heavy civil construction. So I know what it's like to make a payroll. I know what it's like to book a client. I know what it's like to plan out the job, to have things go right, to have things go wrong. And I think that unique perspective is something that I can offer.
What's the biggest mistake business owners make when they plan their exit?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it often comes down to a lack of planning. Quite often, people aren't really thinking about the exit. They're thinking about building their business. And I'll give you an example. So a friend of mine, he was great at gravel trucking. So he had a truck, he worked for somebody else, then he bought another truck. His brother-in-law started driving it. Fast forward down the road 20 years, he's got 30 trucks on the road. He never thought about building this large enterprise, but now he's got one, whether he likes it or not. And we start digging around in this company, and he's not set up at all for exit. He's tired. He wants to take some money off the table. And now I have to go back to him and say, well, look, it's going to be 2-3 years to clarify and purify your company to get ready so that you can maximize and not leave tax paid money on the table, because CRA is going to reach into your genes and take more out of it. So it's really I'm good at business. I'm not thinking about what comes next is oftentimes the biggest mistake that business owners can make.
So you mentioned that business owners could lose up to $1.25 million in an exit. So how does that happen?
Yeah, so years ago, the government of Canada set up something called the lifetime capital gains exemption. And it's just a number that they said, hey, if you're selling the shares of your business, not assets, but shares, and it's purified, it means it meets a certain stress test under CRA guidelines, you can, as a shareholder, take $1.25 million of the sales price. And that number's pegged for inflation, so it grows a little bit. Lots of old timers will know it as a much lower number. But that means when you sell your business, so I'll give you an example. If you sold your company for $5 million, you could receive $1.25 million of the purchase price with no tax on it at all. If your wife is a shareholder, if you have some kids in the business, they're shareholders, they can all access their lifetime capital gains exemption when you sell those shares, depending on how it's structured. And the idea behind it is really that CRA is trying to encourage the fact that you built this company, and if you were to sell the shares of it, that means it's going to continue to employ people, to pay taxes to Canada, to continue to pay payroll tax, to continue to buy goods, and really build the economy. And so it's something the government set up, and it's a great benefit to everybody who accesses it. But you would not believe how many companies I see on a weekly basis that haven't any notion of this benefit at all. And it's really unfortunate. And so part of my job is to go in, assess the situation, and help people get ready so that they can pass that test and take that money off the table. And if we're talking about smaller businesses, let's say your company makes 500 grand a year, EBITDA margin, earnings before depreciation, income taxes, etc. And you're going to get paid 4x on it. So that's what a buyer is saying, is that I believe your company will produce $500,000 a year reliably over the next 4 years, and therefore I'm willing to pay $2 million for it. That's really what it means. For the owner, that means they could be receiving that $2 million and only $750,000 of it is taxed because of that exemption. And if their wife is a shareholder, then that means the entire thing is going to them free of tax. It's huge.
What's wrong with most advice regarding succession planning and exit planning today?
I think there's a lot of good advice out there. There's a lot of great advisors. It's probably not necessarily what's wrong, but more what I bring to the table is that I've sat in their shoes. So before I got into advisory, I owned a business in forestry and heavy civil construction. So I know what it's like to make a payroll. I know what it's like to book a client. I know what it's like to plan out the job, to have things go right, to have things go wrong. And I think that unique perspective is something that I can offer. So there's nothing wrong with getting advice from your corporate lawyer, from your accountant. It's just a different perspective when you sat on their side of the table, built businesses, exited businesses. So, I've lived a lot of this firsthand. I came from a family business, went on my own, built my own business and really started to understand how this works myself. And really, I'm just here to help people walk through that situation without all the technical jargon, to tell them how it actually works. But I've been on the other side. So I worked in an accounting firm doing this specifically with businesses across Canada. And that's what I really love, is just helping people maximize their exit. And really, having walked a mile in their shoes, I feel better prepared to have those conversations with them.
And was there ever a situation where something went wrong? So somebody didn't plan 30 months ahead. They wanted to exit, but they didn't really take a look at how that would look, and then the exit came. Have you experienced any situations where something did go wrong? And can you tell us more about that?
I think not many companies are actually built with the finish in mind. They're actually built more like, hey, I'm good at a thing, and so I go do a thing, and then down the road, fast forward 20, 30 years, and it's this huge thing. So the exit's never been contemplated. So to answer your question, yes, just about every company's in that situation in some form or fashion, because they don't know lifetime capital gains exemption purification. Let's say you made some money in your corp and you think, oh, I should invest that. And now all of a sudden you're putting yourself, because you have this passive asset. CRA is really saying, I want you to reinvest that in the business or pay your tax on it and get it out to your person. They don't want you investing it in that company. So people are earnestly making these mistakes, not knowing that it's a mistake from a tax perspective. So there's something always going wrong. And even if it's not going wrong, there's always little things that just could be better. And because I've seen so many situations, and I'm talking hundreds of clients right across Canada, mostly in heavy civil industries, so forestry, oil and gas, mining, construction, from the small entrepreneur with one machine right up to people with hundreds of pieces of equipment. There's always something that we can find to make it better. And it's really about being prepared, thinking through things, and having someone independent like me who's been in their shoes in a small or large way come in, have a look at the situation, provide some guidance, and just make sure that they're absolutely optimized for exit. Because the best businesses, whether you're exiting it or not, are set up for exit, so that if a buyer does come along, you can capitalize on that opportunity. And I guess the other thing that's really important to talk about is that the mistakes often happen not because you actually made a mistake, but because life happened. You got cancer, or a spouse or a child got sick. You have to get off the tools. And now you're looking to say, well, I need to settle. It happened to a really good friend of mine. He had a really successful business, was a great guy, got cancer, and so fortunately we're able to find him a buyer, but he didn't maximize it. He had to take the offer he was given because it was important he had that cash to be able to provide for his family while he went and did cancer treatments. So it's not that he made a mistake, it's just that life happened. And that's why being prepared for this stuff, using tools like corporately held permanent insurance, using tools like having your succession strategy built, locked, is so important to avoiding those pitfalls.
There's claims out there on the internet that you can beat the CRA or pay less tax. What's the real truth behind that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think everybody wants a tax hack. Realistically, there's just tax planning advice. And we want pass-fail situations. So, I always make the joke, what do we call the person in their medical class that graduates last? Doctor, right? So we don't know they got a C minus. And in tax, what we want to do is absolutely the bare minimum that passes. So we're never looking for an A plus when we're paying tax. We're looking for a C minus, because a C minus means we're compliant. And we always want to be compliant. We want to pay our tax, but we also want to dig and scratch and use every tool that's legally available to minimize and pay as little tax as we have to. So we all believe in paying taxes because they go to fund our medical system, to go to fund healthcare, education, all that good stuff. What we don't want to do is pay too much. And if those tools are there, they've been legislated to our benefit to use them. And obviously, I like corporately held permanent insurance because it is a tool that helps business owners protect risk and build legacy estate planning so that they can maximize what they pass on. And CRA knows about all of these quote unquote hacks, and they're looking for people who don't execute them properly. And so the devil really is in the details in the planning. So no, there's no tax hack per se. What there is smart planning, being a C minus student when it comes to leveraging all the tax opportunities and working every angle that we can, knowing that we have to pay our tax. We want to avoid audit risk, but we ultimately want to keep as much of that money in your pocket as possible. And that's what I help business owners do.
What's one thing you learned from your days in construction and forestry that you use today as a financial advisor?
Again, great question. I think it really comes down to in construction. I used to work on these big, heavy civil projects. So they'd go and build a small hydro dam. These projects would be worth $250 to $400 million. In some cases, they'd be bundled. They'd be $1 billion projects, or a power line, or just a big logging job. We always had a plan, and so we learned that you make your plan and you work your plan. And quite often in succession, in corporate estate planning, we just don't do that. And so taking that same level of care and detail and putting that into action on the other side, which is what happens when I hang up my spurs, right? What happens when I come off the tools and I want to enjoy more time with my kids, with my grandkids. I want to spend more time at the cabin. We've led a life that's really actively planned. We knew our job to the details, but we haven't thought about that next step. And that's what I do, is I bring that level of thought and planning that you put into your business every day into the exit side of it, so that you're absolutely prepared to maximize that result. And it doesn't mean that you're selling the business necessarily, but there are tools available to you to pass that business on to your kids in a tax efficient manner. There are tools that are available to you to pass that business on to your employees. And there are tools that you can pass that business on even if you choose to wind down. But it all starts with a conversation and using that same level of detail that we did, putting into our purchasing decisions. You know, what kind of pickups are we going to drive? What kind of excavators are we going to buy? What kind of mining tools should we rent? All of that stuff is so detailed, yet we just don't spend enough time on the, okay, what happens after? And that's really where I come in.
What's the most amount of money you've seen somebody save by planning earlier than later?
So I've worked in forestry, heavy civil construction, so home building, the trades, lots of knowledge in those sectors, as well as mining, aggregates, things like that. So if you're a business owner doing between $5 and $15 million or above, it'd be great to have a conversation with you. If you have $500K in retained earnings and you're trying to figure out what the hell do I do with this stuff, again, it would be great to have a conversation with you. And if you think of selling in the next 3 to 5 years, or you need an exit today, again, hit me up. Click on the link. Let's have a conversation. It's free. There's no obligation. I'm really just here to help. And if we do business, great. And if not, my phone still rings, because I believe that what I'm doing is actually valuable and trying to contribute to the continuity of business. And let me tell you something else. We're living in the largest wealth transition in the history of humans. And so all of this business that was created by the baby boomers is now being passed on to my generation and to the next generation. So Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, these businesses are transitioning. So there's all of this volume and institutional knowledge that's changing hands right now. So there's vast opportunities and so many people that really just need to retire or are thinking about how they want to spend their time differently. And that's where I help. These planning conversations are so important. Getting out ahead of the curve just will help you maximize the return on your investment, getting your time back, taking more money off the table, and ultimately spending your time and your money with those who you love and the things that are important to you. That's what I do. The other question, not necessarily the biggest, but I think about a friend of mine who was in a business and he just got bored. And he was probably doing $15 million worth of top line volume and really deadly profitable business. He's probably doing 40% gross margin. So big numbers, better than 5 mil a year off the table. And he just got bored and the numbers started going down and down and down. So when you think about a multiplier in that industry, it's businesses then at that time were selling anywhere 3 to 5x. So let's just say 4x for round numbers, and his volume dropped from 15 down to 8. His margins stayed the same, but now he's only talking about 3 mil. Well, 3 mil times 12, or sorry, 3 mil times 4 is $12 million, versus 5 mil times 4 is $20 million. So there's an $8 million spread that really he lost out on. And he didn't structure a share sale, so he sold some IP and assets. And really, it ended up, instead of being about a $20 million exit, it ended up being a $2 million exit. So, $18-20 million swing, not great. Another example, just on assets versus shares, competing offers. One was for 27.8 million. Shareholders took 22 million off the table, and the other was on assets for 24 million. But the tax calc ended up meaning that on the asset sale, I think they were only taking a really high cost base, low cost base rather, and so I think the delta ended up being somewhere around 12 million between the two competing offers. It was really gross. And so, of course, share sales is a no-brainer. We booted some of the other companies out of the process and went with the best offer, and it ended up being a great result for the shareholders. So, $12 million to $20 million spread. I've seen worse, but those are two examples I was firsthand involved with, and was happy for the one group, and the other group, again, just keeping your head in the business at the end. Selling out on an upswing is the way to do it every single time.
All right, Michael, thank you for the interview. So if there's one last thing you could say out of all the questions I asked you, what's the most important takeaway?
My favorite quote: a goal without a plan is just a wish. We spend our lives in business planning and executing. Capital plus analysis, hard work equals success every time. And why not apply that same logic of thinking to when you exit, when you crystallize the retained earnings in your business, not just that number on a page, but when that comes to you in the form of someone offering you cash, whether that's employees, a family member, or a third-party buyer. Why not apply that same level of hard work and diligence to this process? Get ahead of the curve, maximize your exit today. It starts today. It starts with a conversation. Let's have a cup of coffee. Let's get on the line. Let's bat things around, and let's help you maximize your return. Apply that same level of diligence that you use every single day to this conversation. Keep it in mind. Goal without a plan is just a wish.